Hi, I'm Jill from KiteCo and so happy to be bringing you a pattern for another bag. This one is our Jazz from KiteCo. Now I am loving the shape of her, quite elongated and flat. Custom zipper design, and as you can see it goes up into the handle connectors at the back and a little matching connector that sits in behind the snap pocket at the front. So there's plenty of room in this bag to be your everyday carry bag. There is plenty of room. So slip pocket inside. Now you could add a credit card pocket or anything like that you want to inside. I kind of like it in the contrast. And we've included which pieces we've used for this contrast in the pattern if you're just needing some ideas. It can be made in any fabrics pretty much. Vinyl, cork, leather, canvas, woven. The only thing we do say is that the zipper overlay at the back and the handle connectors and the handles do need to be made with a non-fraying fabric. So we do feel you need some sewing skills to make this bag. So we've set it at a confident beginner because it does have a bit of binding. It's not bound all the way around, has no binding along the bottom, but there's definitely binding up the side. So it gives that really good tight finish inside. So this is a full sewing tutorial, so timestamps are down below if you're following along and want to jump through to the stage in the pattern where you need a bit of assistance. If this is the first time to my channel, please do consider subscribing. We do a tutorial for each and every one of our designs, so hit the little bell and you won't miss out on a new pattern. So the pattern will be in store from the 20th of August. So grab yours, it will be on sale for the first 7 days. And sew along with us making your Jazz. So these are our pattern pieces as they are ready to sew. We have our A1, 2 and 3. They all have Deckerville light on the back out of the seam allowances. And the pattern pieces for the Deckerville are all included, so you don't need to start trimming down Deckerville, which makes it so much easier. Then we've got our pocket linings, A4. Now I'm using a light woven, so they are all have medium weight interfacing on the back. Then we have B, which is our back, and our 2 lining pieces. So again, the Deckerville light out of the seam allowance. Now with our base, we have Deckerville light out of our seam allowance. Then we attach the Deckerville heavy with the feet marked on the back. And make sure that is definitely centered. Then we have 1 lining, and I have again got medium woven interfacing on that. Then we have our gussets. Again, the Deckerville light is out of the seam allowance. 2 of those and 2 lining. E, which is our zip panel. Again, Deckerville light on both of those, and 2 in lining. Now with the lining we've also got our zip pocket and we've got our slip pocket. Now it's up to you whether you interface those with lighter interfacing or not, depending on the weight of your fabric. Now I have interfaced my slip pocket. Now then you need some non-woven pieces. So vinyl, cork or leather, something that does not fray. So we've got our rolled handles which need to be non-fray. Your choice of either K and L 1 or 2, there's 2 different options and they need to be in a vinyl, cork or leather. Now M does not need to be, but if you're doing these in a contrast then that looks really cool in a contrast as well. So that's why I've done that separately. So that's all you need in the way of fabrics. You'll also need some hardware, and this is clearly laid out in the pattern. You'll need 5-foot purse feet. I'm using smaller D-rings for my crossbody handle, and I'm using rectangle rings instead of D-rings, so you can choose and interchange those. I'm using 2 zipper pulls for my main and an alternate one for my zipper pocket. So you'll need your 2 zips as well. You will need a magnetic snap, some strips, just scrap strips of Deckerville light, and some strips of rope. Now I'm using this 3/8 camo rope. Now you can use whatever you can find locally. So you can use 3/8, 1/2, whatever you feel is best. Now this has got a bit of a squish to it, and that makes it more comfortable for the handles. So as you can see, this frays horribly. So what I suggest is you melt the end as soon as you've cut it, else it's going to be unusable like this piece is. So that's enough from me. Let's get on and sew our jazz. So we're going to start with our welt, which is our A3, and a pocket lining A4. Now, we want the top of the welt. Now, if you've cut yours out with a cutter and you haven't got the pattern piece, simply fold it in half, and the top, the longer piece is the top. So we want to lie that right side together with our pocket lining. Clip that in place and sew along there at a 6mm. So we want to open that out. Now what we're going to do now is flatten that seam over towards the welt and then sew along there at a 3mm top stitch. So now we want to take our A2, which is our pocket exterior, and we want to lay that up against the welt. So we're going to sew along there, and then again we're going to flatten the seam over the welt and top stitch like we did before. So that's all sewn. So now we're going to mark the holes for our magnetic snap. So it's 1 inch down from the lining seam, I thought. So again, we're just cutting these, we're not placing them at this stage. Now we want to turn that over at the thinnest point so it matches on the ends. Now this fold line is on the pattern pieces. So if you've ironed your deckerville in the right place, that should be along the middle line. And now we want to top stitch along the top. So now we can place our magnetic snap. I put the female part in here, but you can obviously do it whichever way you want. Now it does have deckerville on here already, so it's up to you whether you want to put more on there. I'm not going to, it's fairly solid. So as you can see, I've put a bit of deckerville over the back of the prongs so they're not going to pierce any of my fabric or the front of the fabric. Now we want to add our bag tag. Might be just as easy to mark this from the back as well. So these measurements are all in the pattern. I've just put a bit of double-sided tape across the back to protect that. Next we want to take our top front and our remaining pocket lining and sew them along there. Then we want to open it up, put our seam down over the lining. So we're going that way this time and top stitch along that bit. Now we have that all sewn, we want to prepare our handle connectors. So turn them over. I have edge coated mine a bit because they're a bit nasty on the edge, and just put double-sided tape. Now I use 3mm, which is not really strong enough to hold it, but I don't want double-sided tape in my needle. So we're just going from the edge to that little point there. Add a strip of deckerville light down the middle. Now I've just got some offcuts here. I mean, I didn't fuse them in earlier, so I'm just going to put a bit of glue down there. It doesn't really have to be adhered, it just gives it a bit of strength on your handle tab. So now what we're wanting to do is fold these over just so that they're even. Can be helpful just to keep a couple of clips in those. So it's this distance here that dictates how far you're folding it over. So what you're wanting to do now is sew top stitch from this edge down there to 3mm past this line here. So what we want to do now is put a piece of double-sided tape in the middle of each one. Keep it out of the very edge because that's where you're going to sew. Put your rectangle or D-ring around it. Now what you're wanting to do is have that 12mm or 1/2 inch above the top. So you can either eyeball that or just measure it like that. And have that set like that. Out there. Now it's good to check that they are the same distance. Get another piece of double-sided tape. Now keep it well out of the 3mm around the edge. What we're going to do now is put those on there. So take the back off your tape, draw a line with an eraser right along that line that we just drew. And what you're wanting to do now is sew across here, going under the 3mm where you stopped your stitches before, and right around the edge. So you will need to make sure that's out to get your... Now what I do is I start there, go around and come back over that. So I've got a double stitch over that piece there. So they're all attached. Now I am going to be adding a rivet to the middle here. So I'm just going to eyeball. Now you want it, you can see where your tab ends. You want it to be before your tab so that it is actually securing the tab as well. So I'm going to eyeball where they are and put my rivets in there. Now we want to take the other side of our snap and put that where it says to on the pattern. So find your pocket and lay that on the front. So do your snap up and make sure you've got an even amount here and clip those into place. Now you want to trim your pocket. Lift this up. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew from this point straight in and then come down on a bit of an angle. So straight at that point and then down like that and along the bottom. So you're enclosing your pocket. So then just trim a little bit off the edge of your pocket. You don't need to trim along the bottom, leave that there. So now we just need to baste down the edge of our pocket. So just baste down over the welt. So that's our front all finished, all basted, and our pocket is all attached and secure. So we'll put that aside for now. So we're going to be working on our zipper overlay, which is our L. And there is the two choices, one with a little bit more angled corners and one with a slightly rounded. So again, we put the Decavil light down the centres. You can see I've edge coated this very messily. Put some double-sided tape. I use a 3mm so that it stays well out of my seam allowance. And again, just over to the same distance as at the bottom, just like you did before. Again, we're going to stitch down there, or top stitch, to 3mm past this line, again like we did before. And do that on all four sides. So that's stitched down to there. Now, again, we're wanting to come down so that we've got about 12mm or ½ an inch. Now we want to put some 6mm double-sided tape all around the inside. Now keep it well within the inside so that you're not going to be stitching over it. But you don't want to be too close to the middle edge because you need to trim around in there later. Now you want to take your B back. Now you should have centres marked. And what I find easier is to actually have this on a grid centre line. Okay, so that's level there. I take the top and the sides off, leaving the bottom on at this stage. And you have got a measurement of how far you need it to be. Give it a good push, pressurise that on there. So what we're wanting to do now is stitch around the very edge, going up the top, along, down, and then just follow the outside. So that's all sewn around. Now what we want to do is trim the fabric from in the middle of here. So the easiest way to do that is to, well, there's lots of ways of doing it. So what I do is go to a V under the end of the overlay. Then turn that over and get your scissors in between the overlay and the fabric. Just be careful not to cut the overlay. So that is all ready for our overlay. So let's work on our zip. You'll need your 2 F pieces and your small zip. So what we're going to do is put our zip on the right side of one of them. Now this always seems like it's backwards. So you're putting your zip right side up on the right side. Now I might run a little bit of double-sided tape along here. Now I'm not going to go right into the edge because I need to be able to get down to sew the edge later. Then we're going to do exactly the same with the other side. Now you can do them one at a time or you can do them together. Just for speed, I'm going to do them together. So again, this is the right side of your zip on the right side of the fabric. So line up the sides of your pocket. Make sure it's going to line up. Okay, so what we're wanting to do now is sew along each of those. So you want to sew along that one and that one. Just make sure that one comes back out the way when you're finished, so you're not catching it in underneath at the 6mm seam allowance. So press those back firmly. You can iron them if you want to. And I'm going to put some double-sided tape. Don't come in the last little bit. and keep it on the outside of the seam. So you want to put your zipper pull on here before you attach your pocket. I put that in upside down like that. Now I find the trick with these is to come definitely on an angle and just push it down evenly like that. Okay, so I want my zip opening to the right, so I want it that way so that it opens to the right. So I'm going to take the top off first, and what we want to do is have that centered in the middle, so you can kind of see where the pocket comes to at the side. Take the tape off the other side, like that. So what we're wanting to do now is stitch around the inside of this rectangle. Make sure that these are nice and flat when you do that. Make sure these pockets stay out flat at the back. So that's our zipper pocket all done. What we want to do now is turn it over and lie our, you'll need to pull that off the tape, our zipper pocket down like that. So as you can see, one is longer than the other. So we're going to trim that down. So what I do now is I pull that back at that point, stitch down there and along the bottom and back up there, and I double back over my zipper tape so that it's definitely all nice and secure. So add a couple of clips in the bottom there so it stays flat. So that's what that looks like at the back, and our pocket's all sewn up and is separate from the rest of it. So we've got our back and we've got our base. So that's got the 2 layers of Decovil on it. What we're wanting to do is lie that like that, so that our back is lining up with the bottom. Now we want to sew along there, along that seam, 10mm or 3/8 of an inch. And then we're going to lay the seam over the base and top stitch. So we've sewn it and top stitched it to be over the base. So it's lying over the base and we've top stitched it. We now want to get our front and do the same. Open it up and line up those 2 seams and do exactly the same. Sew along it at 10mm, lay the seam over the base and top stitch. So what we want to do now is trim our seams at the very end. So what we wanted to do is trim that end off without cutting the seam. So cut it down to the top stitching. So that's what you've got on the middle, and that's what you've got on the outside. So put that to one side for now, and we're going to take our zipper panel. So you'll need your zipper and your 2 exteriors and your 2 lining. So as you can see, there's a curved edge and a flat edge. We're wanting to put our zip right side down. So I'm actually going to use some double-sided tape just along the edge. So I'm going to do that on both. I don't usually use this much double-sided tape, but this canvas is not behaving itself very well. Take that off. Your tape along the edge. Then put the flat edge over the top. So it's lining up at the end. So So they're meeting. These are much easier with this. And just clip that in place. Now don't bend it round as you do it, because that's actually going to move the fabric and not keep your zip straight. So you want it completely flat when you're putting the clips in. So we're wanting to stitch along there at our 6mm. So then we want to take that and clip it out together. Now when you've got Decaville on there, it can be quite firm to do that. So just get some pressure in behind and clip it in place. Take the other side of your zip and line that up with the edges of the zip. Turn that over, and again, flat side, lining it up with this side at the beginning and end. And we're going to sew along that seam again at the 6mm seam allowance. Again, flatten that out. So what we're going to do now is just top stitch down both inside edges of the zip. So before we go any further, it's a good idea to put our zipper pulls on. I have been known to forget them. They line up like that. Now you can trim your zipper a little bit at this point. I'd use better scissors than that, but don't use your good fabric scissors for trimming zippers. And always re-secure the edge. Whoa, be careful that you don't burn the house down. That's meant to be cotton, so I don't know why that's doing that. Okay, so we'll put that to side for 1 minute. I'm using a crossbody strap, so I need D-tabs or D-ring tabs for my crossbody strap. So I'm going to make the tabs. So you need a piece of Decaville light. So I'm just going to run a bit of glue down it, down the middle. Now you can measure this if you wish. I'm just going to eyeball it. Then I'm going to put a piece of double-sided tape down the middle. I've got glue all over my fingers. And we're wanting to bring those ends into the middle. I'm using 3/4 inch, which is what I've stipulated in the pattern, but if you want to use bigger or smaller D-rings, you would just need to adjust this tab to be the right size. Okay, so what we're wanting to do now is top stitch down each end at a 3mm seam allowance. Just trim up any overhang you've got. Now I didn't stop and start, I just went down and across. What we're going to do is put a D-ring on each end. I don't put a piece of double-sided tape in here because I don't want it under my needle on this thick seam. So we're going to get our zipper panel. Now we want to overhang this edge here over the end of that by 1 centimetre. Now if you're using the H hold tabs instead of a crossbody strap, you would do exactly the same. You would prepare them and put them this way. So what we're going to do now is we are going to baste right around the edge of the zipper across here and along and back. So we're just doing a full square. So what we want to do now is get our D tabs. We'll take our exterior and our lining, and we want to put that end, not the notched end, the flat end, together with each edge on both ends. So it's not the notched end, it's the flat end, and line it up with each edge. Now this is quite a thick bit, so if you're on a domestic, take it very carefully, and this is where your choices come in. I'm using quite a heavy vinyl for my tabs. Flip that over and we're going to put our lining in the back. So just add it to your clips. So you will have that overhang on your zip, which is meant to be there. So it's the flat end opposite the notches. So what we're going to do now is sew down each of those at 10mm or 3/8 of an inch. So now it's simply a matter of folding that out, back and front, clipping it in place, so we can then top stitch down either of these. Now if you're using the H tab, you would fold it back and catch it in your seam allowance. So we'll just top stitch down both sides of there. So that's our zipper panel all done, top stitched along there. Now they are still loose at the end like they're meant to be, and we can put a rivet in there if we want to at this point. So I'm just putting it through a rivet through there into there so that it's not through my lining. So it's flat like that. So that's our zipper tab all complete. Now, if you're not using rivets, that's okay. It won't make any difference. It just adds a little bit of extra strength for the crossbody strap. So we'll put our zipper panel aside for now. And we're going to work on our slip pocket. Now there's many different ways of doing a slip pocket, but in the pattern we are just going to sew down there, along and up, but we need to leave a turning gap in the middle, and the fold is indicated on the pattern which way it is to fold. So we're going to sew down there to the middle. In fact, if you put a line there, you don't forget. I've been known to forget. Pick pick up the seam and back to there. So that's all sewn. So I don't cut my top corners, I just do cut my bottom corners. Now we're going to top stitch along the top. With using a contrast thread, I like to do a double row along the top. Just makes it look like it's more of a feature. So now we want to take one of our back linings, mark the centre, and so we're wanting to put this in the middle, 1 inch up. Just to hold it in place. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to half this pocket. Now, if you're going to mark, don't forget, always use an air eraser marker. So I'm going to sew down there, along the bottom to my mark, up there, back down, along and up. So I've decided to put a rivet at each corner because I quite like to dress those up and I just like rivets. But also, if you're going to do that, when you punch your hole, don't go through the seam, so that it's like in the middle of the seams. So now we want to take our lining base, lay that right sides together with this. And what we're going to do with this seam, we're going to start with a 10mm seam and we're going to increase it so that in the middle it becomes a 12. So it's going to be slightly concave in the middle. Now the reason we're doing this, well not that much, but the reason we're doing this is because it will tighten up our so it's like that, so that we've got a bit of a concave in the middle. Trim that. Open that out, get your other lining and do the same. Start at the 10mm going to 12 or the 3/8 going into half and then back to the 3/8 again. So trim that. Then either finger press or actually iron your lining back over the lining away from the base. And that is our lining. So now we're going to put that to one side. Right, so we've got our centre marks here and here. And we've got our centre marks on the bottom of our gusset. Now we also want a centre mark on the bottom of our lining. Just a very little notch. So what we're going to do now it doesn't matter which way this goes on the bag. So what we're going to do is line up our centres on our gusset. Now you can do these both at once if you wish. Line up the centres. Now we're going to sew from that notch to that notch. Now you want to get your needle right in that corner, like right on it. not past it, right on it, because you want to come, you definitely don't want to be this side of it or that side. You want to be right in line with that row of stitching. So sew down there at 10 mil. So that's all sewn. I don't know if you can see that I've come right up in line with that stitching there. So what we're wanting to do now, make sure there's nothing in the way. What we're wanting to do is cut right along the edge of that slit to that seam, but do not cut the seam. At both sides. So along the edge, but not cutting the seam. So I'm not sure if you can see that. So I've cut to it, but not past it. So what we want to do is fold that seam under like that. So that seam is going back, they're staying out there, and that's going back. And we want to top stitch from that seam along there to that seam. Don't know if you can see that very well. We're going from that seam in line with the 3 mil from the gusset to that. So we want to stop and start at our top stitching, so it looks like it's almost a box around it. You've come right to that stitching to there, and from there to there. So we'll turn it back over, and we want to put our feet base in. So it's a good idea to put a board or something in the middle so that you've got your zip on the other side. And we're going to cut our slots. So I'm going to put a piece of double-sided tape just over the edge, just to help secure them in place and to stop the prongs damaging the lining in your bag. Now you can put another thin bag base over this if you wish. You could glue a piece of thin plastic boarding or another piece of Decaville Light if you wish to have a more solid base and if you want to give these a little bit more protection. So grab our lining and we want to find our center points. So if you haven't marked any of your center points on your lining, do that now, and on your base. So that's the back. So we want to put our back towards our back. Now, so we've got right sides together and linings together. Now what we want to do is get our lining, and line that up with that, like we did before, our center lines, and move this back so that you can get to the other side as well. Line up the center of the base with the center of the gusset, and like we did before, we're going to sew from that notch to this notch, and the same with the other side. Right, so we've sewn between the notches on both sides, and what we want to do now is do exactly what we did on the back and snip to the seam, just to the seam. Just don't cut the thread, and follow the little notch. Right, so what we want to do now is turn our lining. So basically turning it inside out so that everything's the right way, like that. But we also put your zipper on that side and that like that. So what we're wanting to do now, go to one side, line up the notches like that, and put a clip. So you've got the notches together and the slit together like that. So make sure the seam on the lining is up. Now you have to pull this around because we've tightened up our lining. So you're wanting to make sure that that might be easier to line that up first on our gusset. And make sure that that seam is up again. It's easier if you can pull the zipper panel around a little bit to give yourself some more space. Make sure the seams on the lining are facing up. Line up the slits. And put a clip in there. It does get a little bit tight because our lining is a little tighter than the exterior and we're working from this side. And those two pieces. Make sure the lining is up in the bag so that it's going the opposite way to the exterior seam. And you want to make sure your pocket's well out the way. Okay. So the plan now is to put some double-sided tape, some 3mm double-sided tape around the edge of here. Now we're going to baste this together in a minute. You can baste now if you find that easier. So we're going to get the 3mm double-sided tape right into the edge of that. So take your clip off for a minute and put it back over the top of. So we're just putting it on the outside, on the very edge of the lining. You have to kind of coax it to go around the corner and give it a bit of pressure down because you need it to stay in place. Now we're going to attach our binding. Now I have done some double fold binding. I make this myself. It's really easy with a very cheap binding maker. Open one end of it so that the fold is up, and we're just going to stick the very edge of that on our double-sided tape right on the very edge. Now do leave it overhanging at that end by, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch, a couple of centimeters, and just bring it round onto the corners and around as you go. Now the reason I prefer bias cut is because you see how easily it stretches around the corners, whereas if you're using something else it's not as simple to get a nice finish around your corners. And this is much easier to get around here than the double-sided tape. Oops, there goes that clip. I'm doing this a little bit backwards with the camera. That's okay, we've got it. So I'm clipping the exterior and the lining with the bias attached in place. So we've clipped the back there, and as you can see here, our edges meet right in that point. And we're going to baste around there. But I'll clip this side on at the same time. So just bring that to the front so that you can see it. Again, make sure that your fold is up like that when you do it, and allow an overhang. See how easy that goes around the corner? You can use lots of things for binding. But the good thing about making your own, if you've got spare fabric from your lining, you can make it the same, but I quite like a contrast binding. A little bit of pull on it around the corner, not too much. To sew this, it is easier to pull this around, because then you can get right into this point here. And just make sure that that is pulled out the way so that you can start your stitching at that point there. So you can pull your binding round if you want. So you're just going from the end and round. So the binding is in the edges, all basted in. Now what we're wanting to do is turn this back the other way. Now make sure your zip's open. And make sure you have marked your centres on your zipper panel. So I think we'll start with the back. You can start with any side you like. So we're going to line up the notch on the back and the notch on the zipper panel at the middle. Now I'm going to be sewing on this side, so I'll put my clips to this side. Now we want to come into the corner, so we're just going to fold the bag down like that and lift up this corner, because we're wanting to get into where we've basted and that. So we just wanted to add that into that clip. So what we're wanting to do, it's probably easier to see at this side, is line up both of those corners. So the box there and our corners on our notch and our slit line up, and put a clip in there. Now keep your binding out at the back. Now I come back to this side to get it in around the corner, because when I need to go around, you'll see it's much easier just to put it in the corner like that and push it into there. Like that. Come to this corner. So we've got the middle done. So we're going to go to this end, pull the binding out the way so you can see what I'm doing. So we're just folding that over so that that seam comes out and lining up that corner. So that our ends line up perfectly. Now if you've got a gap, if one's dropped down at the back, you might get a little hole on your corner. And that's not what we want. Push that down at the back if you need to get the clips nice and flat. Right, so that is all ready to sew. But what I find is a bit of a help. So I've got, this is for painting, but just any easy removable tape will do, because we want this, we don't want it in our seam at the back. As you can see, that's going to pull up there. Especially as you go around the corners. So we're going to be sewing this flat like that. So I just gather that up. It's so easy to remove, it just comes off. But there you go. So that helps as you go around the corners. So what I do is I put it down against my machine like that, so it's flat. Pull the base over, and what I do is I put my finger in there and pull it out sideways like that. So the base isn't being bent too much, it's just coming over at the corner. And that way you can get your machine, you can get your needle, make sure that's out at the bottom, right in here, because you want to get as close to that point, you want your needle right in there to be able to sew. So what I use, if I'm on a domestic, I use a zipper foot and come right in there. So we're wanting to stitch this, the seam allowance is in the pattern, but we want to start on that notch. So that's a 10mm notch, 3/8 of an inch, and then come out to a generous 6. So between 6 and 8mm, or between 1/4 and 1/2. Just test our corners just to make sure we haven't got anything uncaught. So as you can see, there's no holes in the corner. So come to this edge, fold that in over like that, and I just tend to hold my finger in that there, which pulls that bit down, and fold it over like that. Now I put a clip right over the edge. It's folded that in a bit more, and a clip right there. So then it's just a matter of clipping our way around. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back and stitch another seam. Now this time we want to do it at 6mm, just off this edge. So we want it to come right around here, and you can get your owl and pull it over as you sew. But it actually stays in place really well when you're sewing around it. Again, make sure that your buckles are down and behind. So that's that all stitched around the edge again, and as you can see it's come in a little bit there. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to see up in there. This is more the piece that you see in the bag. And so now we'll do the second side again. Hold your lining back. Right, connect our centre dots, which I can see there and there. And hold those exactly together. Remember, straight side or flat side on the outside. So make sure there's nothing hanging down in there. Hold the lining down and line up those points. And probably right, so I've stitched around there. Let's take off the tape. Maybe I should leave it there till I trim the edge. And again, tidy up the end. So I trim that one back to be what the rest of the seam allowance is. So as you can see, I haven't cut a huge amount off. And flip our binding up over the end. So here again, it's probably a little bit much. So trim that to be a little bit less than 1 inch. So we're wanting to make sure it's out tight. Pull it over like that. Just push it down into that gap and fold it up over. And put a clip in there, and I put a clip over the end as well. And that is our second side all done. So now we can just turn our bag through. Just push on your corners. Don't take out your fingernail like I just did. Got a cotton sticking out that one. And give that a really good press back, or bit of pressure when you fold that back around your corners. Push it down in the edges. As you can see, that's why we make our lining a little bit smaller than. See if I can get some light in there for you to see. See, that's why we put our lining seam to be a little bit tighter than the rest of it, so that it sits nice. Our pocket. So we're going to do our rolled handles. So we want to mark a line 2 inches from the end. and a line down the middle. Now there's lots of different ways of doing rolled handles. I just quite like this one. So if you've used a lighter weight vinyl, this is quite solid, I suggest putting a bit of Decovil Light just down that end, just in the middle there. I'm not going to on this because it's quite solid. So we need to get some double-sided tape. I'll get my thicker one. And put some down the middle. This is to stick the rope to when we do it. Now I have seen people glue these as well, which is quite effective and seems to work quite well. And then we need a piece of, just down the middle, on top of the Decovil Light if you've put that there. This might not work so well because this is quite thick. So we've got tape down the middle, tape down there. Now we want to do one more piece of tape, and that's down each edge. Now 3mm, because I don't want to put it in my seam. And if you use 3mm, it'll keep it out of the seam. Just down the edge in the middle. So what we're going to do is push our ends into the middle. And this doesn't really stick to the tape because it's too strong. And put a clip further up, it's easier just to hold it in place. So it's easy to do them both at once. Make sure that's stuck on there after that. It might work better. Let's try that. So we wanted to turn them over. And we want to mark a line 2 inches from the end. So this is on the right side. It seems a bit crooked, doesn't it? So what we're going to do is sew 3mm from the edge down here along our line and back to the end. Now I do a full box around, so it's covering the ends as well. So I've sewn around those, and then I take a baby wipe and just wipe off all my silver pen. There you go. So take those clips off. Now you can trim the ends nice and level as well if you've got any overhanging bits on the ends. I normally edge coat these before I put them on the bag, or put end cap. So now we want to get this double-sided tape backing off. Take one piece of our rope and put it in as far as you can and stick it to the double-sided tape straight down the middle. And that's a bit long. So if you need to cut it, have a lighter handy. Put that in and push that down. So what I do here is I bring those in as close as I can together and fold that back in a V like that so I can get a clip right in the end. As you can see, it's much easier if you've got double-sided tape holding those edges together. So bring those up, push that together like that so that you bring those edges out and get a clip in as close as you can. So as I said, I've heard people glue all this together and then sew along it. So when you're sewing, you just come in as close as you can. Doesn't matter if they're a little bit loose, but the tighter you can get them, the better. So what we're wanting to do now is stitch 2 rows down here as close as we can to our rope. So I always use an owl to push that in like that to keep it flat. But sometimes it can be difficult to get really close. So get as close as you can. Sew 1 row that way. Then because we want to sew another, I turn it that way and let's do it that way because it's a lot easier to get in close at the end than it is at the beginning. So start as close as you can there, come in there and go there, and then if need be turn it over to do the second row so that you can get in neat or close at the end. So the second row, a couple of mil on the outside of the first, so it's just a bit of reinforcing. As you can see, I've come into the end like that. Hopefully you can see the stitching. So you probably can't see where I've started 1 row and finished the other. Let's take a really sharp pair of scissors and cut a beautiful straight line, because I'm sure some of you can, I can't, fairly close to the last row of stitching, within a couple of mil to that last row. And at the end, just go off where it goes off. So that bends around like that, and that's our handle. So again, fairly close to that line. So I have edge coated those and they are ready to put on. So we just slide that through there. Now I bring mine up to where it's level with the other row of stitching, and I'm actually going to stitch a box around there. So you're putting the loop upwards like that and through. Now the other thing you can do is put strap ends on there with fold over metal, or you can just put a little bit of the vinyl over the edge as well. So I'm just going to sew a little tiny rectangle around the edge there. Now for our crossbody strap, I'm doing the 1-inch strap. Now mine is not long enough, so I'm going to have to join it. So if you've ever had to join a strap, it can be a bit fiddly. Basically put them at right angles together and draw a line across there. And we're going to sew down that line. Alright, so I've sewn just off the line. So what you want to do now is fold that back and just top stitch down either side of those. And that gives you your join in your strap. So just trim those down. And that is all ready to make our strap. So I'm going to draw a line down the middle. And I put a piece of double-sided tape down there. Fold that over to the centre. Not quite to the centre. Fold that side into the centre. Just leave a little gap. It just makes it easier to fold when you're turning it that way. So I just clip my way along doing that. So now I'm going to sew down and go along that edge, making sure they're all joined up at a 3mm top stitch. So I've put a bit of double-sided tape in the middle of this little square, and I'm just going to put it over there. I've also edge coated it as well. And do the same on the other side. And I'm just going to sew down the edge. So we're sewing our little ends over. Slid a swivel hook on one end, and you can either sew around there or rivet it, or both. Go up through our slide adjuster. This is a little bit tight for this. Back down the other side. Now you want to leave a big loop there. I'm actually doing a fixed strap with this one. I'm not going to leave the adjuster on, but I'm going to show you how it works. Put it through one of these. Now through that side, I put it through the far side. And back through there. And then it's simply a matter of putting a rivet through that piece there, either sewing or a rivet, so that when you do it up, that becomes your crossbody strap. So that is our jazz all finished, handles on, and I've done a fixed crossbody handle. And inside we've got split the pocket. You can do that as one piece. You can always put a firmer base on it if you would like something firmer for the base. Stylish little bag.